There we go. And then starting the live any second here. Make sure it's live first. It says excellent connection. Only assume we're live. So there we go, Dan. We're live.
All right. Welcome to the Critical Christian Podcast. We're your host, Justin. Dan.
I'm sorry, what? We've only been doing our profession. Okay. You're Dan.
I'm Dan.
I'm Justin, not Dan.
No.
And what do we do? What?
Questionable answers and provide.
That's the answer to the.
We ask questionable questions.
We ask critical questions about the Bible
and provide questionable answers.
Thank you. And I think in another 3 more years we'll be able to do an intro without screwing.
Yeah, I believe it.
We'll see what happens with it. I mean, it's iffy. So with that, Dan, we are on Exodus chapter
16 revisited.
17.
Okay.
Although there were some lingering questions from chapter 16 that I think we want to cover first, don't we?
I think we better, because I spent a lot of time writing it.
I think we ought to do that. Now, for those who don't remember what happened in chapter 16, I'm sure Dan would love to give us a recap.
Yeah. So in chapter 16, they were talking about manna and quail.
Oh, man.
Nah.
Oh,
quail.
That was a bad one.
Agreed. And it was all about measuring manna, basically, which we'll certainly get into again in the revisited part.
Look, we had some interesting questions about the collection process.
Oh, sure.
I don't know if those made it.
You know they did. Yeah, you know they did.
All right, good.
I was very thorough.
I believe that.
Mm-hmm. All right, so this will be our revisited, and then we'll get into the good stuff, or more good stuff. So according to the computer,
ChatGPT.
It doesn't matter what, I'll just say it was me at this point.
According to AI.
Very smart AI. It would seem as though each person, so if they had to measure their own manna, or a family, had to measure it for the whole family, it should only take a few minutes per person/family. Because I know we were talking about how it was going to take all day or something.
I don't know if that's the case. I think you're right. I think you could collect it pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you don't actually have to stand in line. And why would you need to stand in line? Did they have a problem with liars?
Liars?
Yeah. People just picking up a bunch and saying, look at all this stuff I got,
That's a good point. I don't think you have to stand in line.
Right. Well, we talked about it before, and you were talking about how it would take a long... Yeah, remember?
That was for the water.
The water?
Remember when they were at the Red Sea, they couldn't drink any water because it was bitter water?
Well...
We talked about how they would... When they had the fresh water, how long it would take to consume the fresh water.
I disagree, but
it was just one chapter prior.
Anyhow,
okay.
Also the omer was a standard unit of measurement, so there's no reason to think each household wouldn't have had a measuring.
I suspect so.
They wouldn't really need to weigh it, just scoop it up.
I don't know if they needed to weigh it. We posited the weighing process because it does say that they weighed it. But that being said...
They might have just weighed it, Well,
here's the thought, because it could be both. It could be that they weighed the manna to make sure they got the appropriate amount, but only the first time, just to make sure that the container that they were using was the right size. Then they would use, the same size container.
Yeah.
But also, here's the other thing. If it's slightly off, I don't know if that mattered too much.
Right.
As long as they didn't leave it lying around and let it turn to worms, as long as they consumed it all.
Right.
I have a hard time believing God was going to smite them for collecting a 30th of an ephah too much.
I mean, God is many things, but he's not petty.
He's so petty, though.
I know. But yeah, he probably didn't smite people for that reason.
I don't think so. Not as far as we can tell.
Because if he did, Christians, us Christians here would have to justify it somehow, and we would.
Right.
We'd say, well, clearly they deserved it.
There's always a way to rationalize the text. Always, no matter what it says.
All right. You have anything?
That's it.
All right, sweet. So I was actually going to say more than likely it was an honor system because God would smite them otherwise. You know?
Well, actually, brings up a good point, because if God is the one keeping people honorable here, then you don't really need like overseers or a judge or Moses or anyone to make sure they're doing the right thing. God's going to smite you if you don't do the right thing.
Yeah. The problem solved itself. But as the very smart AI says, if it did take forever, you'd imagine we'd have at least one mention in the Bible of someone complaining about standing in line, because they're really good at complaining.
Good point. You know, the main theme of some of these passages are them complaining. In fact, they do it so much, God wants to wipe them out, or gets upset with them. And in fact, that's why they wandered in the desert for 40 years to begin with. Was they came back and they complained about the inhabitants being, giants,
right?
Even though that wasn't necessarily the case,
or even if it was, just have faith that God will take care of it.
Right.
God is bigger than a giant.
Right. So God says, you're just going to have to wander the desert for 40 years and die off.
I mean, that was a bit extreme, but I'm not God, so whatever.
What are you going to do?
Nothing.
Right.
So as for quail, there's no evidence to suggest that it was a daily provision. Well, I'll get to that.
Okay.
So in Exodus 16:27,
right.
I'm so.
Is the text too small?
No, it's just. I mean, I wrote it a few days ago.
Got what you wrote?
All right. Well, you know what? I don't know. There's no evidence. The end. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. You wrote it down, but you forgot all the work that you put into it.
No.
The
there's
work that ChatGPT put into it.
There's just no evidence. I mean, it didn't say in the book, in the Bible. It just said it fell. It didn't say it fell every single day.
It says it gave a manna in the morning and quail in the evening.
Yeah, one evening.
Not one evening.
Who knows? I mean, who knows if it was really meant to be in the every evening?
Why would you assume it's only one evening? You think they ate manna for 40 years and quail once?
Maybe they had quail every couple weeks.
Why would God give them quail just once?
I'm not God.
Well,
why would they get quail every night?
Because they need to eat.
Yeah, but that would be a lot of quail.
I know. It says in the evening, quails.
Not in the evenings. Just evening.
In the evening, quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning, there was a layer of dew. Does it say mornings or morning?
I would be curious to know what the original text says, quite frankly.
Sure, it says morning.
No, I meant for
in
evening.
the singular.
In the evening, what do you think it said? It probably said, like, at some times of night, something like that.
No, there's an actual Hebrew word meaning evening.
Yeah. Well, maybe.
There's a boker is morning, and I think erev is evening. And
I'll tell you what, I'm going to put a pin in this one, and we'll discuss it next week.
Fair enough.
But I got more stuff, don't worry.
All right, go for it.
So in Exodus 16:27, we were wondering why God had been so annoyed with the people.
Right.
Because they went out to check for manna on Sunday morning.
Sure, yeah, when they were supposed to have already collected it the day prior.
Right. But a response may be that why would the people even be checking to see if manna had fallen if they had already collected provisions? So since they went outside to look for manna, it should be assumed that they were not treating the Sabbath with the reverence God wanted. So there, see?
See what?
Like, that's a good reason for them to be punished. Because we were saying it was a little heavy-handed of God. Just looking out. But obviously, it was more than that, because they were not treating the Sabbath correctly. I mean, if you had collected manna on Saturday,
Right.
you wouldn't need to look on Sunday for it. But clearly they didn't look for it, which means they were not being reverent to the Sabbath, which is what God really wanted, I think.
Well, yeah, I think that's obviously the point. I guess I don't really see the point that's being raised at the moment.
Well, we were just discussing how it seemed a little excessive. Like, why would God be upset with them, you know?
Well, because they broke the Sabbath.
Right.
It says, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and instructions? Which is wild because they literally just got out there. They haven't really disobeyed God up till now. What? And he hasn't really given any commandments other than this one.
Well,
It's kind of a weird reaction. He hasn't really given any command. But anyways, it says, see, the Lord has given you the Sabbath, therefore, and do not. Okay, but they weren't punished.
okay, fine.
You know what I mean?
You know what, fine.
Like they were, I'm sure they were rebuked.
Right.
They weren't punished. They weren't executed. Nothing
Okay,
happened.
fine. I'm going to continue then.
All right, go for it.
So in 34,
Right.
we were suggesting that can we get to 34 actually? Sorry.
Oh, I guess I should have left it in 16.
Yeah, I thought you would, but then you didn't. So 34.
Right.
Just as the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron placed it before the covenant for safekeeping. So we thought this might be anachronistic since the jar of manna had been placed with the tablets of the law.
Or with the Ark of the Covenant.
Either way, but the point is, in verse 35, it mentions they had been doing all this for 40 years. So it's possible that verse 34 was actually referencing a future event, and that before then, the jar of manna was kept somewhere else.
That certainly is possible. Like if you believe that this is now a reference for the future.
Right, yeah.
So it could just be what's the word I'm looking for? It could just be like sloppy writing.
I mean,
It could have said, just as the Lord commanded Moses, Aaron later would place it before the covenant for safekeeping, which he actually does if you read the rest of the Torah.
Or I mean, this is all written much after the fact, so everything you would read here had already happened. So even though this is in the future from now, it would be in their past. So it still makes sense for them.
Right. I'm just saying that the way the story reads assumes that the reader already knows the future events.
Well, it assumes it for a lot of the Bible there that we've read, right? So I mean,
for obvious reasons, because it was written a long time down the road when all the events already took place.
And everybody already knew them, right?
Yeah, they kind of lost track of.
Yeah, so it's not hard to believe that they would, mush them together.
Actually, I don't disagree with you. I think that's a believable reading of it. To say that the editor or the author or whoever was writing here was making a statement about the future, but they just weren't very clear about it.
Right, yeah.
That certainly is a thing that would happen.
Myth busted.
Fair enough.
You scroll down on my thing.
Sure,
All right,
sure.
so, and one more thing. So, as for the real life equivalent of manna.
Real life equivalent?
Oh, yeah.
What?
Yeah. The
manna from heaven's a miracle. There's no real life equivalent.
I mean, I think miracles are more miraculous if they can be done within the confines of the rules, the laws of the universe God made.
If I make honey bread, am I doing a miracle?
No. Anyhow, I'm going to just tell you what the options are, okay? Mm-hmm. One is tamarisk tree resin. Some researchers suggest that manna could have been exudates from the tamarisk tree. This resin is secreted by the tree and crystallizes when it comes into contact with air. It can resemble coriander seeds and has a sweet taste, somewhat like honey. When the sun rises, the resin melts or spoils quickly. Bam.
How did it get on the ground?
Well, so anyhow,
how many tamarisk trees do you think were in the area?
Probably
feed hundreds of thousands of people.
I mean, honestly, they didn't really need to have any. They could just be blown in with the wind.
I would imagine you would need millions of tamarisk trees to feed because you need multiple trees to feed even one person.
They were probably on diets. All right, next one.
Probably a billion trees of tamarisk.
All right, here's
somewhere.
another one. Sweet sap or honeydew.
What?
A sugary secretion produced by the insects that feed on plant sap. So this sweet substance can be found on plants like oak or pine, resembling coriander seeds in its crystalline form, and it disappears or ferments in the heat.
I think you've made it even worse. Because now you're not just reliant on tree sap, you're reliant on tree sap that's been eaten by bugs and excreted.
I'm just saying there are
even less of it.
I'm just saying there are options.
I don't think those are good options.
They're not bad.
I think we should just say it was a miracle.
It was a miracle.
I'm saying you don't need any weird tree sap to figure out how it was done. It's just a miracle.
Agree to disagree, I guess.
How come in the Psalms it refers to the manna as the food of the angels? Bread from heaven?
I mean,
Jesus says that the manna was bread from heaven, John chapter 6.
What's your point?
It was bread from heaven. It was holy manna. It was a miracle. It wasn't...
I didn't say it wasn't a miracle.
I'm saying
why are you putting words in my mouth?
It's not tree sap, though.
Well, do you know that?
Jesus said it was bread from heaven.
Yeah, and this would have been from heaven because God orchestrated it.
No, from heaven.
That's what I just said.
Like a literal reference.
It was orchestrated from heaven. How many things are
Jesus didn't say bread that was orchestrated from somebody in heaven. He said it was bread from heaven.
How many things are made in the USA but are actually just shipped in and slapped with a sticker?
Well, that's just called lying.
Well, I didn't say Jesus lied.
Why are you calling Jesus a liar? I don't think this is the precedent you want to set.
That is not what I'm setting. Anyhow, those are options. All right, next chapter.
Fair enough. All right.
Yeah.
Move on to chapter 17.
That's right.
Lots of fun in chapter 17. We've got our first very super clear edition of Exodus doublets.
Sure do.
But maybe. I'm not going to waste a bunch of time talking about doublets today.
I'll waste time then.
I'm sure you want to.
We have all night.
I mean, listen.
Actually, if we go quickly, I actually did the notes for chapter 18.
We will not be doing 2 chapters.
All right.
I know you want to.
I'm just saying I have the notes available. That's all I'm saying.
I'm sure you did. I do appreciate all the hard work and dedication that you've put into preparing 2 weeks worth of notes, even though you know we're only doing 1 week. But With that being said, let's.
How many verses are in this one?
Looks like 15 or 16.
That's it?
Not a bunch.
Well, then we better talk slowly.
I don't know if we need to. We always fill up this time. It's like a sermon. You always think you're going to preach longer than you need to or shorter than you need to. Then you preach an hour or two long.
Yeah, but what happens if we actually do stop at 8 or something?
Then we're done.
Right, and that would feel bad.
Why?
Well, all of our 2 0 viewers, we'd be like, whoa, what happened?
There was a saying in public speaking that someone told me even before I went to seminary, which was, it's always better to leave them wanting more than to leave them feeling like they've had too much.
Fine.
Fantastic. Okay, right. So let's read verses 1 and 2.
All right, water in the rock. Then all the congregation of the sons of Israel journeyed by stages from the wilderness of Sin, according to the command of the Lord, and camped at Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. So the people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water so that we may drink." And Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?" So this feels similar to when the Israelites were hungry and had to actually tell Moses this before anything was done about it. I mean, surely Moses himself was also thirsty, so why was he unable to realize that the people needed water?
Actually, a really good point, because it's one of those scenarios where we know they're going to get hungry. We know they're going to get thirsty. How is Moses not anticipating this?
Or God?
Well, obviously, God, being the all-knowing, you would think would anticipate that they were thirsty.
It feels odd that Moses considers it testing the Lord when all they're asking for is to not die of dehydration in the desert. That's It's not asking a lot. It really isn't, you know?
Well, remember too, if I could be the devil's advocate for God here.
Okay.
So remember, God said He was going to test them with the manna. That's
Okay.
why they could only collect so much every day.
Sure.
They'd have to rely on God and be tested in their faithfulness.
Sure.
What if that's really what He's doing with the water as well? He's only giving them exactly what they need, and in order to test their reliance on Him. It says in Deuteronomy and elsewhere that the Lord tested the Israelites while they were in the wilderness to see if they would be faithful.
Well, I don't think you should really test people with water. You need that or you'll die. I mean,
I don't think He's going to let them die of dehydration.
now how do they know that?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
As long as they're alive, they know they haven't died?
Well, I think that's what's happening here is that they're alive, they're a little bit thirsty, and God's like, well, let's give them a little bit of thirst, see what happens.
Well, how long was God going to wait?
Well, I don't know. I mean, He seems pretty okay with testing people sometimes.
I
Like
know,
he
but
killed all of Job's family just to test him,
yeah, that did not happen.
but it clearly didn't happen.
All right, that was what we call parable.
I don't know if that's what we would call it, but yeah,
I just called it that.
sure.
And it's the royal we.
Wait, no one said we.
I said we.
Oh, you're the we.
Yeah, I said that's what we call it.
Oh, you're royalty.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
something.
Okay.
All right.
I'll get you a crown.
All right. Well, so anyhow,
You do have a throne right now.
I do.
Would you like a scepter? I can make a scepter.
You know what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to continue my notes.
Oh, sorry. Right. Yeah.
I know we're not in a hurry, but
Go ahead.
all right. I don't really know what the Israelites were supposed to do here. You know, I mean, were they not showing enough faith because they asked for water instead of waiting for God to be like, you know what, these guys are thirsty enough? You know, I mean, I'm guessing that's the case, right?
Yeah, because it says that they quarreled with Moses, which would, lead a rational person to ask themselves, like, if they're quarreling with Moses because they don't have water to drink, they are clearly thirsty. And remember, there's like infants and babies.
Yeah,
and
right.
elderly.
Yeah.
You would think that food and water, if you have a God that's parting the Red Sea, food and water shouldn't be something that is like scarce and difficult to get a hold of.
Right. And yet, I mean, honestly, it does kind of feel like we are supposed to assume that God knows how long they can go without water, and they're so supposed to just literally put their lives in His hands.
I think that's what God wants.
But that's a tall order. I mean, even if you had the Red Sea part for them, that's a tall order when you're thirsty and you got a little baby, you know?
Well, I think that kind of proves the point, though, which is they witnessed the Red Sea part. If God is willing to do that to preserve their lives, then they really shouldn't be questioning whether or not He's going to give them water. But when you're hungry and you're dehydrated and you're in the literal desert,
right,
then obviously that's going to be on the forefront of your mind the entire time. They've been gone over a month now, at least.
Yeah.
And any food they brought from Egypt, I'm sure by now has already been consumed, which is why they need the manna and quail.
Right.
So, yeah, of course they're going to be like, hey, Moses, when are we going to get this thing figured out? We need actual sustenance out here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, remember when Abraham sent Hagar away?
I do remember.
Gave her like one skin of water, and within a short time, they were nearly dead.
Good old Abraham, right?
I still can't believe he did that to her.
That was really messed up, yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the fact that they're arguing with Moses over the water situation is like a super rational thing for them to do.
I mean, I understand though that God wanted them to put their complete faith in Him, but that's still a task for.
Well, the other question too, if God is testing them, which it seems the text is implying,
yeah,
like why?
Well, yeah.
Doesn't He know what's going to happen?
Well, I mean, I assume He's not testing them for His sake, but for their sakes.
Mm.
The idea being that hopefully they'll learn their lessons from this. No, they don't. But, that's not God's fault.
It does say later in the Torah that the Lord tested them in the wilderness to know if indeed they loved the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, yeah. So for them to find out themselves.
Oh, for them to know.
Yeah. I mean, God doesn't need to know if they love him or not.
It's a pretty hasty assumption.
What?
Well, we already saw in Genesis 22 when he tested Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
And Abraham is stopped, and the angel of God speaking for God says, "Now I know that you will not withhold your only son from me."
Yeah, but I think that was for Abraham. So Abraham knew that he would indeed give anything for God.
Right? No, but God himself said, "Now I know."
Yeah, but
meaning he didn't know prior.
I know, but I don't think that actually happened. I think it was the writers just being silly and anthropomorphizing him.
Gotcha. Okay. So when it's inconvenient,
that's right. When it's inconvenient,
say it's not part of the original text or something.
Well, I could say it's from the original text. I just think that they were wrong.
Could be.
No, it is B. It doesn't make any sense otherwise. We're going to have God be not omnipotent? That's ridiculous.
Well, this is a rabbit trail, and I don't want to get rabbit traily at the very beginning of the chapter, but I mean, why do we have this assumption that God does have to be all-knowing? Like, why is that a necessary component?
That's ridiculous. You're being ridiculous right now.
No, I mean, like, realistically, just, put aside the Bible for half a second. Like, if there's a God, why does he need to be all-knowing?
That's just part of being God, isn't it?
I don't know. Why?
Well, there are a certain set of criteria you got to have to be a God worthy of worship.
Why?
That's just how it works. Otherwise, you're not worthy of being called a God.
But all the gods prior to Yahweh didn't have omniscience.
Yeah, that's what, and they were fake.
But that's not what they think. They would say the same thing about your God. They would say your God is fake.
And that's their right to be wrong.
Right. So I guess if you're positing that God can't be God without omniscience, I'm trying to figure out why that's the case.
I don't know why they would have worshipped a God that they, thought did not know everything. That confuses me.
Well, I'm not suggesting that he didn't know things that only a God could know, but I am suggesting that I don't know if there's a necessity for him to know all things, like everything.
I think there is.
Why?
I don't know. Just seems like he should.
Well, if God literally knows everything, then we would just take free will off the table. You don't really have free will anymore.
That's not how free will works, and you know that.
It is.
You're just being an advocate. Somebody down there now.
No. I'm saying
just because God knows what we're going to do doesn't mean we don't have free will to do it.
Well, it does.
No, that's not how that works.
Well, I'll explain it for you.
All right, I'll wait here.
Okay, so before God created everything, right? He knew everything anyone would ever do before he created them, right?
Yeah.
Okay. When he created everything, did he create things intentionally? Like he had a recipe he put together, or
I presume.
Or was it random?
Well, I don't think it was random.
Okay, so God intentionally created everything.
Mm.
He knew everything that was going to play out before it played out, and he could have changed any one of the trillions of parameters to have a different end result, but he chose not to, which means everything that has been ever done since the beginning of time was because God essentially foreordained it. He put the parameters together that led to the very moment that we're here sitting in these two chairs. He could have changed any one of those parameters, but he chose not to. And the fact that he chose not to, having perfect knowledge, means that the only reason why we're here is because God destined us to be here.
No, I think at a certain point, God said, okay, we're good to go. And he just let everything do whatever it wanted.
Well, then he wouldn't be all-knowing.
Well, just because he doesn't... No, he knows what's going to happen, but he's not, in control of it. He's just watching it happen.
That's what I'm saying, though. If he knew what was going to happen before he did everything,
Yeah.
and he chose to do it the way he did it anyways,
Yeah.
then that means it was still destined by us. I mean, by him. Because he could have changed any one of those parameters to end up with a different result, but he didn't.
I don't have a response to that, to be honest. Yeah.
I know it's a difficult one, but like, so in theology, there's a lot of people that don't believe that God is completely all-knowing. Have you heard of open theism?
I don't know.
Open theism is like a precursor to process theology, but we're not going to go to process theology today. But open theism is kind of this idea where God is working in accordance with mankind to bring about his ultimate will. He knows the end and he knows the beginning, and he has control over the parameters, but it doesn't ultimately know every decision that mankind is going to make. And so he is working in accordance with mankind to bring about the end goals. But there's two ways you can get there. You can say that God just isn't all-knowing, which is fine. There's a couple hurdles with that as well, because there's a few passages in the Bible that would lead you to believe he is. But there's passages that would lead you to believe that he's not. The other way that you can get there is you can say, well, God has the ability to be all-knowing, but he chose to limit himself.
That's believable.
It's kind of like, I have the ability to see, but I chose to cover my eyes and now I can't see.
Right.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
So there's this idea that God does have the ability to know all things, but he chose to limit that. The problem, though, is that God is like theoretically outside of time, which means he already knows all things at all periods of time, and so you can't necessarily limit yourself because you already know the thing. You'd have to like go backwards in time and wipe out your own memory. That it creates a weird like inception situation.
Yes.
All that to say.
Yes. All that to say
is that God doesn't have to be all knowing. He could still be God without being all knowing.
Yeah.
Which would make sense then why he's testing the Israelites. Because he does want to know.
Yeah, right. Whatever.
No?
I mean, I just still disagree. I just don't have.
Well, I'll posit one more thing.
Okay.
Can an all-knowing being ever change its mind?
I mean, probably not.
Of course not, because it already knows what it's going to do.
Okay.
It's impossible for an all-knowing being to change its mind.
All right.
Okay. Which means Exodus 32, maybe in verse 14, if I remember correctly, it says that God changed his mind concerning the evil he was going to bring upon Israel.
Well, is it possible that that's just how the writers' minds figured it out? I mean, they think, oh, he must have changed his mind, but in reality, God was never going to change his mind. He always knew what he was going to do.
No, because God says out of his own mouth, tells Moses to move aside so he can wipe out all of the Israelites and make a nation out of Moses. And Moses intercedes for the Israelites, and then it says that God changed his mind concerning the thing that he was going to do to the Israelites.
I know, but is it possible that God had no intention of wiping them out and just wanted to do this to see, to give Moses a chance to grow?
Well, see, now you're on the double-edged sword, because if he said the thing and he didn't mean it, then he was lying.
Is it a lie?
To say something that's not true?
Actually, it doesn't matter. Lying isn't a sin inherently.
Yeah, but Numbers 23:19 says that God is not a man that he would lie, nor a mortal that he would change his mind.
Maybe it's not lying. Maybe he's just posing a rhetorical scenario here.
Right, but if I said to you, if you made me mad and said, Dan, I'm going to run your foot over with my car, but if I didn't mean those words, if I was never actually intending to do that, well, that's me saying something that's untrue.
Is it? You're basically just saying you're really mad at me.
No.
So maybe that's what God was saying.
It is legitimately untrue. I was never planning on running your foot over.
No, it just has a double meaning.
It doesn't have a double meaning.
It does.
No, if I say those words
Mm-hmm.
and I don't mean those words,
Mm-hmm.
I'm lying.
I don't think that's how lying works.
How that works?
Lying is about intent.
It's not.
Not
Lying is saying something purposely that's untrue.
I don't agree.
Just ChatGPT the definition of lying.
I don't need to talk to the computer.
You love ChatGPT. Just Google the definition of what is a lie.
Okay, but what happens when you are wrong?
I'm not. I already know the definition.
All right, fine. Just because it's already up.
Of course.
All right, talk amongst yourselves.
Right, exactly. I'll talk to my other half.
Okay. All right, for a lie to be a lie.
I think you just need to look up the definition of lie. I'll just Google it.
Yeah, why don't you just Google your little Googles?
I'll just. Trouble with my definition of a lie. Of a person or animal.
Yep, that looks right.
Oh, not lying down.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. A lie. Wikipedia page had a definition for some reason. A lie is an assertion that is believed to be false, typically with the purpose of deceiving. But it's just saying something that's knowingly false.
All right, well, this says intent is generally considered necessary for something to be classified as a lie.
I agree. Yeah, if you don't intend to tell something that's untrue,
Right,
then you're not lying. You're just saying something that's untrue.
well, like you said, you would run over my foot.
Right.
I don't think that's a lie.
It is.
I think you're saying the same thing with different words. You're saying I'm mad at you.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Because what was your intention?
My intention was to make you afraid that I would run your foot over.
No, your intention was to tell me you were mad at me.
No. So now you're mind reading. You're telling me what my intention was.
Well, that's one intention. You may have another intention, but it's a perfectly valid intention for me to take away from it.
So your problem solving requires for you to read my mind and know that I'm lying.
Mm-hmm.
So then the problem remains. I'm lying.
No, that's not.
Because in the analogy, God's the one speaking, and God's a liar about his own speaking.
I don't think that's how that works.
Damn.
I think God was being hyperbolic.
Oh, he didn't mean what he said.
Well, he was exaggerating,
Okay.
which is not a lie. I think people would agree exaggeration is not a lie.
Exaggeration's not a lie, but you have to have a measuring tape to know when is an exaggeration an exaggeration. What would be your way of determining that Exodus 32 is an exaggeration?
Because we all know God doesn't want to just destroy everybody. I mean, he's only ever done that twice. You know, he's not going to do it a third time.
Oh, just the Israelites.
Right.
He destroys people groups all the time.
But that's what I'm saying. But I mean, how many? You know, probably just a couple dozen.
Literally all of the Canaanites, the Amalekites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites.
That's 4.
The Amalekites. In
That's
fact, in this chapter, he's threatened to exterminate the Amalekites, and then he does it in 1 Samuel 15:3.
Maybe he was just exaggerating.
He wasn't. Because Saul, when he went to war against the Amalekites in 1 Samuel, left the king alive, and this upset God so much that God himself said, I regret making Saul king, which is wild because an all-knowing being can't regret anything.
Well, it was probably more said towards Saul, so Saul could feel guilty about his actions.
It wasn't said to Saul. It was said to Samuel. God said it to Samuel.
So Samuel could tell Saul.
No, God said it to Samuel the prophet.
Oh, yeah, then how come we found out about it?
Because somebody wrote down the history.
You're telling me Saul never heard about that?
Saul didn't write it down, though.
Saul didn't know that God
It's a
was...
third-person story.
Saul doesn't know that God's disappointed with him?
He does eventually.
All right, then.
But that's not what the word that was spoken to Saul.
Well, probably something similar, huh?
Sure, it was something similar, but the word was spoken to Samuel. The book says that God literally said, I am sorry that I made Saul king. I regret it.
Well, I think that's just the writers putting their own emotions into it because
all right.
what? That
Right.
makes makes sense.
Yeah, but you see, kind of, the problem solving hermeneutic that you're employing here is that when the text says something that disagrees with what you believe, rather than agreeing with the text, you just say, well, the text is not like authoritative.
No, I'm saying you're misinterpreting it.
I'm not, though.
Well, I think you are.
But you literally just said that it's the interpretation of the author.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how do you know which passages are
We're
just
interpretation the interpretation of the author.
right? But you see, what you're suggesting is that when you don't like what it says,
Mm-hmm.
you're assuming that it's just the opinion of the narrator,
Right.
but you only do that when you don't like what it says. You're not doing that for anything else.
Your point?
My point is you're just kind of picking and choosing what parts of the Bible you're accepting.
That's why I'm a Christian.
Fair enough.
Right?
Fair enough.
Okay.
That is the thing that typically happens. Okay, I think we beat that horse sufficiently dead.
At least I admit it. You know what I mean?
I agree. You do. You're
Yeah.
honest about it.
Yes.
And I can't fault you for that.
No.
So we're in verse 3 now?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, we did a lot on verses 1 and 2.
We did.
I think we don't have 30 verses this week, eh?
Yeah, we could figure it out.
All right, well, let's read verse 3 and see if it takes an hour to get through one verse.
All right.
All right.
But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses and said, "Why is it that you have brought us up from Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?"
I mean, I can see why they would feel that way. They're in the middle of the desert.
Yes.
We already talked about this.
Yeah, I don't know what else there is to say. I mean, I understand they're complaining a lot, but yeah, so it's water. You know, it's not like they're like, this man is decent, but could we get some meat? They're saying, hey, can we continue living?
Yeah, and that's a good point because if you're in the desert, right, you've got really two complaints. One, do you have food and water? And two, is there a way to shelter from the sun? That's about it.
Yeah.
Right? So when one of those two basic needs isn't being met, you're going to be a little concerned.
Yeah.
You would be concerned that you would die because that's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see the Israelites here acting out of hand. I think they're behaving the way any other rational people would behave.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
I mean, I don't know. We talk about all the plagues, and we talk about, you know, even setting those aside and saying those didn't happen or what have you. I mean, there was the Red Sea, and it did part, and then they did walk across, and then it did, come back down and kill the Egyptians. All that to say, that was pretty impressive. Maybe they should have just, said, you know what? We would have died if you hadn't done that, so our lives are yours.
Actually brings up a good point. Okay. What if the miracles up to this point, other than the manna, obviously, what if they weren't actually as miraculous as the narrative is painting it?
And right? I mean, the manna doesn't have to be as miraculous either. As we saw, there were ways. Anyhow,
but the point is,
I get it. They're like embellishing it, sure.
Well, if some of the miracles up to now have been embellished,
yeah,
even the plagues, let's say they've been really embellished,
right?
And this actually becomes even more plausible, right? Because they haven't really seen Yahweh do something that is like super extraordinary that like another god couldn't have done. Because the Egyptian magicians could do stuff, right?
They could, yeah, that's true.
So if it happens to be that the Red Sea crossing maybe wasn't quite as miraculous as it was in the Charlton Heston film, then it might warrant the Israelites being like, dude, we're going to starve out here. We're going to die of dehydration out here.
But, I mean, I would question how it would be less miraculous. That it would not be that.
I mean, it could have been that the water level just got low because a beaver dam broke on the canal, and it got stuck for a period of time, and a lot of
Yeah.
But let's assume that there was something naturalistic like that, where the water of the canal got either stopped up, or there was a tidal force that caused the canal to go low because the Red Sea got low, and then they were able to walk over.
Because maybe it wasn't completely dry.
Right.
Maybe that was a part of the narrator just embellishing it to make it even more impressive.
Right, and that's kind of what I'm suggesting.
Because I'm always telling you, I'm trying to look for a way for these things to have happened, right, within our laws, and so I could see that
their behavior is much more consistent with a people group that maybe only witnessed like some minor miracles, but miracles that could have been done by anybody else, like any other god that they heard of.
Oh well, yeah, except they've never seen any miracles by them.
Well, we don't know that.
Well, yeah, because they weren't real.
No, but they would believe that they were real. Like if they're in Egypt, the land of magic, in fact, the land of the gods, as they were called by some in Egypt, certainly they would have witnessed things that they would have believed were from other gods.
They just attribute it to other gods.
Right.
Like it was like a tornado or something.
Yeah, because remember, even the Bible says, Yahweh says that he's going to judge the gods of Egypt. Was it Exodus 12? I think he said it.
Well, yeah, I remember that. Right. And that, well, yeah.
So it seems to me, just looking at their behavior, if we're taking their behavior seriously, it seems to me that they're behaving in a way in which the events of the prior chapters may have actually been a little bit embellished as to what happened in real life. But again, I'm just speculating some things here. I'm not suggesting that is the case.
That's yeah, no problem with speculation.
Right.
Nothing to add.
Okay, let's do verse 5, eh?
Sure. Probably 4 though.
Oh, did we do 4?
No, we didn't do 4.
Oh, we should do 4 then, obviously. Yeah.
So Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, "What am I to do with this people? A little more, and they will stone me." Sounds like Moses is being a little baby here, right? At least Moses, of all people, ought to have faith. Like God would ever let them stone him, right?
That's a good point, and I wanted to mention that because let's imagine that they were dissatisfied with Moses' leadership. They can get him out of leadership without stoning him. It's weird to me that Moses is afraid that he's going to be stoned by these people. You know what I mean? Why wouldn't he be afraid that they would just elect a new leader?
Right. Or just, ignore him.
Is Moses being a hypochondriac? Or hypochondriac?
I mean, if ever there was going to be one, it sounds like him.
It kind of sounds like
he always seems to jump to conclusions,
I do think that Moses might be a little hasty here. Maybe a little overreacting. I agree with that.
Where's Aaron to talk him down from the ledge?
Yeah, where is Aaron here?
He's always the voice of reason, isn't he?
Yeah. It's interesting here, too, that we've got in verse 6, with the talk of Horeb. Actually, let me check. Which parts of Exodus?
All right, I'll probably sneeze, so this works out.
Oh, you need to give it a good sneeze. All right, go ahead and sneeze. You're right there. Yep, just get it out. Yep, there you go. So I'm showing here that the majority of chapter 17. This is from the Bible with sources revealed by Richard Elliott Freeman.
I read that.
The majority of chapter 17 comes from the Elohist. So this is a northern text, and Aaron's not really mentioned all that much until you get,
because Moses is their guy, right?
That way, at
least. Isn't that how that was done? Because they were from different tribes or something?
Slightly, but
oh, slightly. Nice.
In chapter 16, the majority of chapter 16 is a priestly text. And in the priestly text, guess who's mentioned more?
I bet it's Aaron.
Yeah, Aaron is very important because he's the first ancestor of the priestly line.
Yes.
So I'm curious if we'll be able to find more divisions like this as we go through Exodus, where it seems like the priestly text emphasizes Aaron, and the older Elohist text is going to emphasize Moses a little bit more. And also in the Elohist text, the father-in-law of Moses is Jethro. And remember, prior, his name was Raul.
Yeah.
And here, the name of the mountain is Horeb. But in the Elohist text, I'm sorry, in the priestly text, it's Mount Sinai.
All right.
So there's some points that we might want to notice as we're going through Exodus.
Yeah.
Because I think Exodus, like Genesis, is really a combination of the northern.
You know what I'd like is a Bible that had both of them. They didn't just try to,
Oh, you mean where they've been separated?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could do that. You could take Richard Elliott Freeman's book and you can just copy and paste the sources out of it into your own.
Well, I mean, I assume that, when they were writing the Bible, they had different sources, right? They had the North and then they had the South. And then they're like, okay, how do we piece this together?
Right.
I'm saying I'd like those separate pieces that don't exist.
Oh, you mean the parts that are missing?
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd go. That's a good point.
Can you imagine them? I mean, they must have thrown that out, right?
Yeah, it would seem that way.
And that's kind of a crazy thing to think of because those were some important texts for them, right?
Well, they weren't treating it at the time. They wouldn't have been treating it as though they were sacred. The law would have been sacred, but like the narrative, the historical stuff, not as much.
Still seems crazy to throw it out.
Yeah, that these people were just cutting things up with scissors and
right.
copying and pasting
and
like it was nothing.
And they're like, well, this is our past now.
Which is funny because people would give like Thomas Jefferson a hard time over doing the same thing with the Bible. That's what Thomas Jefferson did with his Bible. But like he wasn't doing anything that the original editors weren't doing. But let's go ahead.
He said his was the one where it took out the miracles, right? Something like that.
I forget what all Jefferson took out of his Bible, but he cut a lot of stuff out of it. You can download a copy of Jefferson Bible online.
I'm not gonna do that, but yeah, I get you. Yeah.
Are we on verse 5?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Pass before the people and take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand your staff with which you struck the Nile, and go." There's always got to be a big show out of it, huh?
Yeah.
Can't just be like, "Here's the water."
That's a good point. Well, I'll comment on that when we read verse 6.
It does mention, though, the elders of Israel, which means there had to have been at least a rudimentary system of leadership. So, which explains how they're able to, get all this to the 2.5 million people or however many they were.
Because there were already elders before they left.
Yeah, there was already a system set up,
We would have to assume they were still the same elders that were there. Moses freed them.
Yes.
Because it wouldn't make sense to have a whole new leadership put in place.
Right.
I agree with you.
I mean, they'd have like new elections and.
Oh, that'd be terrible.
It'd be crazy.
Fighting. But let's read verse 6 and then I want to make a comment.
Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it, so that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel.
So to the point that you made prior,
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of a big show here. Like there's a lot of pomp and circumstance just to give water to the people.
Yeah.
And here's the other problem is it's a big show for water to come out of a rock, but remember there's hundreds of thousands of people here.
Yeah.
It seems like leading them to a river of fresh water would have been a more reliable Wait, how big was the water source that came from the rock? Because I mean, why you're constantly trying to break my bookshelves? I mean, assuming that there's, a million of these people out there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, are they just gonna line up with their jugs and fill up from the water rock, or?
Well, I mean, as I get into, try to discuss, what actually happened when he hit the rock. So I'll discuss that.
Okay,
right now.
Okay, well, yeah. Go ahead and give us your rundown of the water rock.
All right. So this is basically how did the miracle happen based on the laws of the universe? Because that's what I like to try to figure out.
Sure, fair enough.
So we're going to turn to our old friend, Mr. GPT. You know, when I say that, you act like I'm reading you the message or something. You know? Anyhow, so the most likely theory based on current scientific understanding would be the underground water reservoir or natural spring activation. Many desert areas have hidden aquifers or springs, sometimes under rocks or rocky formations. Striking the rock could have triggered the release of water if the rock was sitting above an underground source or was blocking a spring. And there are other less plausible solutions. So, but the point is, it all seems grounded in science. I mean, we think of it as though it was like a tiny little rock, but what if it was like a huge boulder or something,
I actually like this theory because this is plausible. If there's a big underground spring that just needs to have a rock moved, I can see that. But the wording, I think the wording could work too. It says you will strike the rock and the water will come out of it. It seems to be implying that water will come from the rock itself.
That's ridiculous.
But I mean,
then again, there are
could just be badly worded.
There are some rocks that contain water. Okay.
Like what?
What?
Like what?
Just rocks. They're just water rocks. I didn't add it because it would just seem too implausible.
I've never heard of water rocks. I do know that there's a type of storage mechanism for water in the crust of the earth that's crystallized.
Okay.
But this reminded me of do you know you can use ChatGTP to reword the Bible in Gen Z language for the young people?
I've never tried.
I just told it to reword Exodus 17:6 in Gen Z language. It says, "Yo, I'm gonna stand by this rock at Horeb." I don't think they say "yo" anymore. Yo, I'm gonna stand by this rock at Horeb, hit it with your stick, and water will start flowing like crazy, so that people can drink. This is a vibe. Trust me. I think I actually like that one. This is a vibe. Yeah. So the ChatGTP has some usage, better than the message. I would take ChatGTP Gen Z over the message.
Well, I mean, ChatGPT can give you the message, so it's basically the message plus more.
I wish it wouldn't.
Well, you're wrong to wish that. This is changing the world.
ChatGTP or the message?
ChatGPT.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe the message. I don't know. But
I don't want to do that.
I'm just saying, giving people greater access, not a bad thing.
I get it.
To the Bible. You know what I mean? All right.
Right, so verse 7?
Verse 7. Then he named the place Massah and Meribah because of the quarrel of the sons of Israel and because they tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Sure they did. I think this was, again, just a way of explaining why the place had such weird names.
Yeah, I agree. But that does bring up a point, which is they're in Mount Sinai region. They're near Horeb. And they're kind of like, renaming stuff down there.
Yeah.
But that's not their land. So, like, at the time this was being written, let's assume I don't know, let's just say it was being written for the first time during the reign of David or something.
Okay.
Um, like, they don't really have the authority to rename locations in Sinai. People, like, are living there already.
Okay.
And that's not their territory. They're going to leave that desert soon and go into the promised land.
Mm.
So, like, I guess I'm curious how it retained its name from a people group that didn't actually even live there. I mean, is that kind of weird?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like they do that a lot. They name things as they walk through them,
I think that's one of the things that, when we read these stories, it makes it feel more like mythology and less like history, because realistically, it sounds like they're making up explanations for things.
Right.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Mm.
That does get fixed in the later historical work. When you get to, um, like Joshua and Judges, when they start naming stuff, it feels more authentic because they're like, oh yeah, this is our land. We live here now. You know what I mean?
Mm.
But it's clear, even as they're in the land, a lot of stuff never gets renamed. It still has the old names from the Canaanites. We'll get to that in 5 years when we're finally in the conquest era. But anyways, yeah, that's all I had to say about verse 7, though.
Sweet. That's all I had to say too.
Great. Now we get to talk about the Amalekites, which is actually kind of interesting.
The miraculous battle against Amalek.
Right.
Amalek. I think that's better.
Let's read the expansive first verse of this section, verse 8.
Let's do it. Then Amalek came and fought against Israel at Rephidim. Bam. So Amalek.
It's wild that you have a whole paragraph on just like 9 words.
Uh-huh.
And the next 2 verses, you've got like 1 sentence. Go ahead.
So Amalek, or the Amalekites, is a name derived from Amalek, the grandson of Esau, who, as we know, was not very well liked by God for questionable reasons. Right. So I'd be curious to know whether this was merely some whitewashing of history to paint them in a bad light, or if there was actual proof of their battle.
Well, there's a couple things, too, that are weird. So I put a map up. There's a couple weird things about the Amalekites going to battle with the Israelites at Rephidim. Because
what did I say? Rephidim, right?
I think you could pronounce it either way. I wouldn't.
Okay.
But so Amalek is way up here, in the Negev, the wilderness, just below the foothills.
Okay.
What are they coming all the way down to Sinai for?
Well, I don't know.
Isn't that a weird thing?
Well,
I have a theory.
So the Amalekites met them down there just to attack them, or?
Yeah, it seems that way.
Because the Israelites wouldn't walk all the way up there, and they didn't, because they were down there.
Well, see, that was I'm curious if they crossed over. See, right here to the Yam Suf. This is where some people think that they actually crossed over rather than at the Red Sea. But one of the maps that we previously talked about had them crossing the Gulf of Aqaba down here by the Red Sea. But if they crossed the Gulf of Aqaba and then they're back here again, then they could have looped around the Gulf like this and then come down this way. But if they did that, then they'd be coming close to the land of the Amalekites. But and I'm glad you mentioned it, here's where I think it would make more sense, is if the Amalekites' location at the time of the Exodus was different, and the reason why I'm positing this is only because the Amalekites, as you mentioned, were descendants of who?
Esau.
Right. And where did Esau live?
Probably in East Isaria?
in Seir,
I was pretty close, actually.
right?
The
So
Seir means red.
yeah, actually, let's.
You're impressed, I know.
I'm always impressed when you remember certain factoids,
Yeah.
and then you forget some too. So here we go. So here's a map of ancient Israel, but you'll notice the kingdom of Edom down here. It extends pretty far south. But let's find a better map. This is not necessarily time period, but the land of Edom is roughly around here-ish, but it actually extends further south. Now, in the later period, it seems like the Amalekites are closer to Lachish, or maybe just south of Lachish, maybe even up here. But if it's true that they're the descendants of Esau, they could have had this territory right here between the Gulf of Aqaba and between the Dead Sea.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, and the Israelites did cross over at some point and then loop around the Gulf, then they kind of would have been tangentially going through the territory of the Amalekites. And that might raise the alarm bells.
Mm-hmm.
You got a million, 2 million people just kind of
Right.
casually walking by your neighborhood, looking hungry and thirsty.
Right.
And this was a period where there was a lot of nomadic raiding happening. In fact, there was a number of kingdoms that were under threat by nomadic raiders. In fact, one kingdom in northern Assyria was toppled for a time period by nomadic raiders called the Gutians. And so certainly a big, massive group of nomads would ring some alarm bells when they're coming by your region. I think that would make more sense, as if they were actually maybe slightly a little more south, a little more east of what a lot of the modern Bible maps places.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into it, do you think maybe they attempted to make peace first, and the book doesn't say so?
I doubt it. They probably just said, "Hey, Moses, what's up?" And Moses said to God, "What's up?" And God said, "Kill them all."
Well, it says in verse 8, Amalek came and fought against Israel at Rephidim. It doesn't say if there was anything that led up to it. It doesn't say that if there were peace talks that failed, or anything like that.
I mean, it's possible that, as you said, they just assumed they were bad guys, and they needed to take them down.
That's kind of what I'm thinking is happening. I'm thinking that Amalek saw the people and said, "Oh boy," and they're like, "Let's just go wipe them out." And then it didn't go so well.
Right.
I don't know, but did you have any more notes on this before we go to 9 and 10?
Sure didn't.
Okay, let's read 9 and 10 because this is going to get really interesting now.
All right. So Moses said to Joshua, "Choose men for us and go out, fight against Amalek. Tomorrow I will station myself on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand." Joshua did just as Moses told him and fought against Amalek, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Well, that's a new name, huh?
Yeah, right.
I assume it is.
Finally got Joshua introduced.
Oh, yeah, him too.
He's important.
Was that the first time he was introduced?
I think that might be the first mention of Joshua in.
And they're just throwing it out there?
Well, yeah, it's funny that they throw his name out like everyone's going to know who he is.
Yeah. And also Hur.
But yeah, I think.
Because apparently Hur was just some guy who was somewhat important, and that is it.
17:9 is the first mention of Joshua. That's what I thought. Yeah, so it's funny. They just kind of throw his name out there.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, so can we conclude, even this early, just in the beginning of Exodus, that Joshua was the leader of the military?
I mean, because Moses is telling Joshua to get the military together.
Right.
And Joshua was like, yes, sir.
It's definitely some background information that they assume the reader knows.
Mm.
And we only know it because we read ahead. I mean, we know other parts of the Bible.
Right, yeah. What about her?
I don't really remember a whole lot of details about her, honestly. So I don't know if I could speak intelligently on that particular individual. I mean, he does show up again, I'm sure.
I mean, was he somebody important that they knew about? It's just
he does show up again in the text. But I kind of forget some of the details about his life. But if we go to Exodus, he shows up a handful of times at
hurried? That's not right.
17. Then it shows up again in Exodus 24. It's right. Aaron and her. Exodus 31, he shows up. So he shows up elsewhere after Exodus too, but I unfortunately I just kind of the exploits of his life escape my memory.
Probably because there's nothing else mentioned about him.
I mean, there's some stuff about him, not a lot.
Extra biblical?
Oh yeah, there's extra biblical stuff about her.
Why? Where did they get the information?
From extra biblical writings. Hundreds of extra biblical writings.
Well, yeah, but a lot of those are not authentic, right? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, not.
What?
I mean, obviously they'd be in the Bible if they.
Well, that's not. I don't know if you're joking now or not, but
I'm saying from the perspective you're coming from, they clearly can't be authentic because they're not in the Bible.
That's not the perspective I'm coming from.
I guess I'm confused.
I'm just saying.
What do you mean by authentic?
There are some that are obviously written, like they're that are obviously fake. Written about things that, whatever. Just help me out.
You mean, are the stories true?
Yeah, something like that. Well, everybody seems to like this one book. What's it called? The
Enoch.
Enoch, yeah. Even though it's not in the Bible. So that makes me think that has a greater chance of it being something that should have been in the Bible.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Like we should have removed Revelation.
I think Revelation. Nor did the book of Daniel.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there was that lion's den that was pretty big. It wasn't that Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego were in Daniel?
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego?
That's what I said.
Exactly.
Were they in there in Daniel?
Yeah.
Well, then see, these are two very important stories.
Look at you. You're like a Bible scholar now, remembering people's names and whatnot.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, well, let's go ahead and read on.
All right. Number 11.
Right.
So it came about when Moses held his hand up that Israel prevailed. But when he let his hand down, Amalek prevailed. And Moses' hands were heavy. So they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and one on the other. So his hands were steady until the sun set.
That's pretty crazy.
Want to know what I think? I think that was cheating.
How so?
I think Moses should have just sucked it up.
Well, that's a good point because it's not like he was fighting or anything. But he is also like 80 years old.
Yeah, but at that time, 80 was like the new 60.
Well, he's 2/3 through his life because he lived to 120.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it'd be like us being 60, like you said. Yeah. I don't know. How long can you hold your arm up at 60?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, they were probably a bit healthier than us, since they had to work all the time. I'm just saying it's weird that God would give him this way, and then they'd be like, all right, how do we circumvent this so that we can keep doing it? You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's weirder than that. Because what happened every time he left, his arm got heavy and he let his arm fall down?
They lost.
And what happens when you lose in battle?
I bet people die, right?
Yeah. Oh, so every time his arm got weary, God was like, I'm just going to let people die.
I suppose.
His own people, not the bad people. His own people.
Right, yeah.
That seems super petty and capricious.
Well, you know, it's possible nobody died. Maybe it's just that, the tide turned a little bit. Maybe people were just getting hurt.
This seems like a weird thing to do.
I know.
You know what I mean? Isn't it weird?
Of course it's weird. I mean, what do you want me to say? Yes, it's very weird.
Makes you wonder though, because it seems like they only fought for like one night, for one day.
Yeah.
Right. So let me see. So they took a stone and put it under his arm, and he sat on it, and Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one side on the other, so his hands were until the sunset. Okay, so they fought for one day until the sunset, and then the army went away defeated, which would lead you to believe it couldn't have been that big of an incursion.
Right. Yeah.
It might have been even we'll say championship warfare. You ever heard of a champion warfare?
Actually, I have. You know why? It's David and Goliath.
Exactly.
That's what that was, right?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Bam.
It could be possible that the opposing armies picked one or multiple or many people to go to fight rather than the entire people group going to fight. Which is why it could all be done in one day.
Or it was just a splinter group, right?
Could have been a splinter group. It could also just be possible that the defeat of the Amalekites was so devastating that, after one day, they're like, I think we were wrong about this. Let's just go back home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a possibility.
Because, I'm just thinking it was a pretty big land, right? And I'm sure even among that land there were different groupings, right? So it's possible it didn't represent everybody in that land. It was just, maybe the group closest to them. I don't know.
Good point.
Was there a king or anything?
We assume so, right? But to the point that you made, though, it's certainly possible that it was a faction of the Amalekites that came down.
Yeah.
And they got there, and they're like, this isn't going to end well. Let's just leave. Let's get out of here before we all die.
Right.
But it is weird that at certain points in time, they were able to be successful, namely when Moses' arms got tied. What do you think the odds are that, in reality, when these two people groups went to war, that when Moses lowered his arms, the people just got superstitious and made up this story about his arms? It's like the correlation isn't a causation
I get what
situation,
you're saying.
but it really makes for a good story.
That's a hell of a placebo effect, right?
It's the same reason why a lot of football players won't wash their underwear during football season, or they'll wear the same pair of socks for every game, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, or I have a friend who does that Beyblade stuff, and whenever we sign up for a tournament, he's like, "Okay, I'm never using my Beyblades until the tournament."
Oh,
he was like, "I'll use others, but I won't use these, just in case I lose."
Right.
I'm like, "Okay, yeah,
okay."
He still doesn't do great, but the point is, he's not watching this, so it doesn't matter.
People are naturally superstitious.
They are. I'm not superstitious. I'm just a little stiff.
I was hoping that was coming. That was great. I love that line. All right. Should we do 13?
Sure. And Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. I wouldn't say Joshua did much of anything. It was Moses doing the heavy lifting. Lifting the staff. Get it? Yeah. It's a funny.
Well, he had to do it for a long time.
Yeah.
To be fair, holding a wooden stick is difficult to do it for 12 hours.
Here's the thing. The Israelites had no weapons, no armor, no trained soldiers, and won. I have no trouble believing this.
It's actually a really good point because they wouldn't have been outfitted like a normal army.
Yeah. Did they have any weapons? Any armor? Why would they?
Would have had to have something.
Why? All they had is what they took with them from Egypt. Did they have blacksmiths and?
I'm sure they had spears and daggers, and I'm sure there were tradesmen among them that could make metal workings. that probably wasn't a problem. But would they be as equipped as the army of Amalek?
I would think
Probably
not. Think
not.
not. Yeah.
No, I mean they're
Those
just
guys are raiders. They fight for a living.
They're escaping in haste, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then again, it could be that they outnumbered Amalek.
I mean, it certainly would appear so. I mean, 2.5 million versus, I mean, if it was just a little band of them, right? So I don't know how many people lived in that area at the time.
Well, I did some math over the week, and I texted you about it earlier. But if there is 2.5 million of them, and they're standing out in the desert,
right?
If we give 2 foot of space per person, we've got about 19 miles in a circle worth of people. Imagine you walk up to a people group within your army, and there's 19 miles of people. How do you fight with that?
Yeah, I'd be like, I'm out.
Yeah,
I'm out.
I would have been done before I even started.
Yeah. Kind of surprised they even did fight, right?
I know.
Like, I'm out.
I wouldn't even have attempted it. Crazy. Yeah, Joshua didn't. I don't think he.
Yeah, they didn't even need to be able to fight well. They just needed to have a lot of bodies that they could throw at the situation.
It's like the Russia fighting Ukraine. We don't have to do it well. We just got to throw enough people at it.
Yeah.
There will be casualties.
Yeah.
Lots of them.
But they won't be the people in charge.
Right, exactly.
That's okay.
Yeah. When the rich wage war, it's the poor that die.
Yeah.
Those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That. Let's do 14.
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this in a book as a memorial and recite it to Joshua, that I will utterly wipe out the memory of Amalek from under heaven." And he did so, since no one spoke of the Amalekites ever again, except for right now.
Well, he does it in 1 Samuel 15.
What's that?
Well, kind of. 1 Samuel 15, it says that they wiped out all the Amalekites except for King Agag. And then he gets slaughtered subsequently later because God was mad that his life was spared.
Okay.
You would think that after 1 Samuel 15:3 that they don't show up again because they were completely annihilated.
All right, cool.
Except they do show up again. So, and that's why you can't have nice things. I don't know if we've recorded an episode this year where you didn't drop your phone on the floor. I want to put a carpet on the floor just below your chair for your phone. So yeah, no matter what they do to the Amalekites, they just keep showing up.
Yeah.
Even when the Bible says they were utterly annihilated, every last one of them that had breath, and then it only takes a couple chapters or a book later, we see the Amalekites again.
Mm-hmm.
You can't kill them. Can't get rid of them.
Is it possible it's like a different group of people, and they keep renaming them the Amalekites because others are the big bads?
Well, I think most people would go to one of two theories. It could be anachronistic. It could just be oversight by the editors. Or it could just be hyperbole when it says that they utterly annihilated every last one of them and not one remained alive. It could just be a little bit about hyperbole, which is probably what happened. But
I guess we heard about that.
But the problem we have is in Samuel, God says that he wants every last one of them wiped out. He wants even the memory of them blotted out, like what we read here in Exodus.
Yeah.
Right? So if that's the case, it sounds like complete annihilation. It will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek under the heaven. That seems to suggest all of their lineage, every one of them. But yeah, I think most interpreters go with the idea that, well, it's a hyperbolic language. Is probably the better of the ways to fix the issue.
I mean, it's possible that the narrators just put words in God's mouth, right?
Oh, that's certainly possible.
Okay, yeah. Because we're always looking at it, and you're like, yeah, but God said. And I'm like thinking, well,
did he?
I mean, the writers, they wrote other things that we look at and go,
Right.
So why is, I mean, it seems like it would be a bad idea to put words in God's mouth, but I wouldn't put it past him.
And that would be That would be the slippery slope that I would warn some people about, which is like once you get to the point where you're willing to suggest that the author is putting words in the mouth of God, well, now we kind of have to come to the determination of, well, how do we know which words is from
Right.
the author and which ones are from God, right?
Yeah.
That's a hard position to be in.
Well, it is. I think you just have to figure. I mean, the way I look at it, you look at it, what is the character of God? And then what of the things that are in the Bible, go with that character. I mean, that's why.
Well, how do you know what the character of God is without the Bible?
Right. That's why, for Paul, you just have to just say, you know what? This guy is crazy.
He's insane.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're going against Jesus, then I'm not going to listen to you.
So your starting point is Jesus. If you're saying, well, what is the character of God?
Yeah.
Your starting point is Jesus.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay. Or, I mean, is there any way to know who God is without the Bible?
I think there are some good philosophical arguments for God without the Bible, yeah.
Therefore, you should be able to know what his character is.
Well, I think in order to come to a philosophical understanding of God, you have to get rid of a couple things that are uncomfortable. Like you would have to get rid of the omni properties of God. Can't believe in a God that is both all good and all knowing and all powerful.
Yeah.
Because then you would have to have an explanation for why there is a nearly infinite amount of unnecessary suffering in the world.
Well, I don't know if it's unnecessary, but I get you.
Well, I would give you a good example like natural disasters.
Yeah, but I would give you a response to that.
Like what?
People don't need to live near them.
Near what?
Natural disasters. Wow.
There are more people on the earth than places that you can live without natural disasters. There are very few places on the planet where you can live where there is never a natural disaster.
Well, I mean, it wasn't God's fault that so many people were born.
He told them to populate the earth.
Yeah, but he probably didn't say, but, he probably said, but don't go crazy.
He said, be fruitful and multiply.
Yeah, but I mean, multiply
having children is literally the point.
Until you're, no.
So you're suggesting God told them to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, but what he really meant was just have a kid here or there and make sure that you don't have too many babies?
And don't put your houses near natural disasters. Yes.
How do you not put a house towards where a tornado is?
We live in Ohio. We don't get tornadoes.
Right. Very few places in the United States never get tornadoes. In fact, when I was a kid, our house nearly got destroyed by a tornado.
Well, so my point is, everybody could just move to Ohio.
My house in Ohio was nearly destroyed.
Yeah, but how likely is that to happen, right?
Even if it only happened once, it's irrelevant.
All right. Well, I'm sure there is some state that has never had a tornado.
So, you want the entire population of the USA to move to one state?
Just saying, it's a possibility.
I think that's ridiculous.
Well, if we didn't have so many people, so maybe people multiplied too much.
So now you think we shouldn't have babies?
Oh, just enough to fit inside that one state.
Okay, so this is all mankind's fault. We had kids because God told us to, but we shouldn't have actually had kids.
Well, not as many as we had.
And then everybody on the planet should have migrated to a location in which there would never be natural disasters.
It sounds better when you don't say it.
Right.
So
why did natural disasters need to exist?
No. They're just part of the earth.
Yeah, who created the earth?
Well, I presume God.
Did God know it was going to have natural disasters?
Yeah.
Could he have done it without natural disasters?
Of course.
So then they're unnecessary.
They're only natural disasters if they affect humans.
We'll try this again. If God could do it without the natural disasters, but he chose to make the natural disasters anyways, then they're unnecessary.
Well, here's the thing. It's all part of the free will,
It's not.
Yeah.
God created natural disasters, not mankind.
People drown in the ocean. Maybe God shouldn't have made the ocean.
But God created...
Obviously, we need water.
But we don't need a tornado.
Maybe we do.
For what?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we need forest fires.
I don't think we do, actually.
Well, we do. They do. Yeah, we need them so we can they raise the old.
When was the last time there was a forest fire in the Amazon?
I don't know.
There isn't. Because it's different climate. You only need forest fires in certain climates.
Yeah, and those are the ones that is good to have.
Right, but you don't need them elsewhere.
Right.
But also, I don't think forest fires are natural disasters.
They might. Well, I mean, if they're caused by lightning.
Well, lightning itself is another problem. Why is lightning necessary?
Is it necessary? Without it, we would not have discovered electricity.
So?
Oh, we need electricity.
Why?
It's nice.
Did they need it in Jesus' time?
No.
Was lightning good in Jesus' time?
I'm sure it was just whatever.
Okay, so when someone gets thunderbolted by a lightning 2,000 years ago, it was a good thing?
No.
Because now we have electricity?
No, they just, I mean, if they had had electricity back then, I'm sure they would have appreciated it too.
Right. But what I'm suggesting is if you believe in an omni God that has all these omni properties, you have serious problems with trying to square them up. You get like a Mexican standoff with the omni properties.
Right. And I'm saying I disagree, but that's fine.
But then you have to find a way to say that all these natural disasters are necessary for something.
They don't have to be necessary.
Then they're unnecessary.
I think there's a spot in the middle.
There's not. If it's a dichotomy, it's either necessary or it's not.
Well, I don't know if that's true.
It is true. Just definitionally. Something that is unnecessary is by definition not necessary.
Well, I'm just saying it could be somewhere in the middle where it's like you could take it or leave it.
No middle ground.
You could take it or leave it.
There's no middle ground.
You could take it or leave it.
The definitions are dichotomies.
Yeah, you know what? Humans make the definitions. We can write a different definition.
Am I here or am I there? It is a dichotomy. I'm only here or there. I'm not both.
Well, what if you're teleporting between the places?
That's not possible.
I'm just saying, what if?
Well, you would be neither. You'd neither here nor there. You'd be in a different there.
Or you'd be both. You'd be both.
Yeah, or neither. But you're still missing the point. The definition of necessary entails that it's the opposite of unnecessary.
Why don't I just write my own dictionary then?
We already have a dictionary.
No, I'll write my dictionary.
I don't think you should.
I'm just saying I could.
But we have words already in the English language. And what I'm suggesting is that if something is unnecessary, like if there's unnecessary suffering, then you have to find a different way to describe God. You can't use the word all good or omnibenevolent.
No, I disagree.
Why?
Because I do disagree.
But on what grounds?
Because I wouldn't say suffering is unnecessary. I would say it's just part of the whole agreement.
So it's necessary.
Yeah.
Okay, what's it necessary?
For the thing for free will.
What does free will have to do with natural disasters?
Because you have the free will to put your house where it doesn't belong.
So everybody that was born on Puerto Rico should have swam across the ocean to a different continent?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying
2,000 years ago?
I'm saying it was the free will of the people 2,000 years ago to have children. So
they should just let their people group die off.
That's not what I said. Can we edit this, please?
You're really bending into like pretzels trying to find a way around this. The only logical answer to this is the God that we're talking about can't possess all three of the omni properties. I don't know why you're married to this omni property situation.
Well, disagree. What's next?
Like, it could just be that God isn't all-knowing. It could also just be that he's, not omnibenevolent.
You know what's not fair about this? You know a lot about the Bible, and I know nothing, and you're just railroading me.
I'm not.
What you should do is say, okay, here's what you need to think of for next week, and then give me some time to research it and figure out what I actually believe.
Well, I'm laying out like pretty logical premises, and I'm just trying to help you to understand the logical problem that are entailed in premises.
Right, and then I'll figure out a logical way around them.
Right. But this is actually not about the biblical God. This is just about the concept of God in general. Like if you believe in a God that has all three of these omni properties, there are some things about the natural world that would contradict the omni properties. You know what I mean?
I understand, and I'm just saying I think I can find an answer for all of your.
I
I just don't have them right now, and they might not be the best answer you want.
Fair enough. Okay.
All right.
I think we got to read 15 and 16 now.
Oh boy.
Okay.
All right. Those are the last two, huh?
Yeah, I know. It's not even 9:00 yet.
I guess we could go on some more tangents.
I don't think.
You want
No.
talk about free will and you know, God's rolling it. Another hour.
Yeah, I mean, if God compels you to do so.
Well, if I do it, I guess it was meant to be.
Exactly.
So I'm gonna. So number 15.
Right.
And Moses built an altar and named it "The Lord is my banner." And he said, "Because the Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war against Amalek from generation to generation." That's pretty depressing.
Yeah.
So God said to Moses, "Oh, hey, by the way, you're going to be fighting these guys a bunch in the next 40 years.
They're not just going to go away."
Yeah, because that would be a bummer. You probably didn't tell the other Israelites, right?
Yeah, that's a good point, because he said it to Moses. Moses, he's not required to say it to the rest of the people.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a weird thing for God to do. Why wouldn't he just wipe them out?
I don't know.
Unless they didn't all come down to fight.
Well, yeah, I mean, that has to be obvious because it was a big piece of land. There had to have been at least 2 million, right?
Well, I don't know how many people were there. Probably not 2 million. But my suggestion is, even if all of the men came down to fight,
yeah,
I mean, literally 3/4 of the population still hanging around back home.
Mm-hmm.
And God wants all of them to be wiped
Right,
out.
that's true. As messed up as that seems.
There are children and young men under the age of 20 still back home in Amalekite territories.
Right, and little babies that have to be slain too.
They will.
Yeah.
15:3, those babies are getting the.
Yeah.
Even the suckling.
Well, maybe they're just getting a fast track ticket to heaven.
Saying, "Happy is he who dashes the infant's head against a stone."
Yeah. So anyhow, well,
That's how they killed the babies.
I understand, but what am I supposed to say to that? A lot of this stuff is messed up.
Pretty bloody.
You know what I mean? I try to, defend God when possible, but some of this stuff, I can't.
I get it.
You shouldn't kill little babies.
I agree. There's got to be an alternative.
But then again, God is into that. Therefore, that's why I'm pro-choice.
That is probably the right biblical position. I don't think you can read the Bible and get to pro-life position to be.
There's a potion for inducing an abortion, and God made that, right? Yep. God's like, here's how you have an abortion. And nowadays, people are like, what? Oh, I don't read the Bible.
First chapter 5.
I don't read the Bible.
And remember, they believe that life begins at conception, so the baby goes to heaven anyways. So
yeah, I know.
Why risk it going to hell by giving it life? Just send it right to heaven and be done with it.
Yeah, I don't think their logic really works. Shocking. I know. I don't know. Use it as a Republican rallying cry forever.
That's what I would do.
It's working.
It is working, yes.
Got a guy like Trump who's a piece of shit. He's like, I'm pro-life,
I don't think he really is.
No, obviously.
But, he has to say that.
He's pro whatever he has to say to get into power.
Well, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. I agree with you. I think that's the end of the chapter, is it?
Oh, yeah. It was a short chapter. It only took us
2 hours?
No,
Let's see. How long were we online?
It was
not 2 hours. Hour 45.
Is that true?
We were blasted through it. It only took an hour and 45 minutes to do 15.
But to be fair, we had a little catching up from 16.
True. And we had some good rabbit trails.
Yeah, and some very annoying ones, too.
I get that.
Yeah. You got to put me on the spot like that. That's
Sorry
fine.
about that.
Yeah.
We'll edit in real time.
Why can't we?
Actually, no one's watching these videos after they're already published.
I know.
Actually, I think Denise is watching them. Hey, Denise, good to see you. But
even though she's not here right now.
Yeah, she actually goes back and watches.
You know what I don't like about Denise?
What?
No, hold on. What I don't like about her is that she was becoming a mainstay. And then she stopped staying.
Well, she has a life.
Well, be that as it may, it was nice to have her around.
All right.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
She'll come back.
And then there was that other guy.
Chet?
Yeah, Chet.
Yeah.
Those guys were nice.
They both have lives to live.
I appreciate that, but they can take some time out of their lives for us.
I don't think so.
I think so. Sometimes. All the time. All right, we're
I
done.
don't know about that. Yeah, exactly. So next week we're on Exodus 18.
18, wow.
It's a long one too. All of 27 verses. Not terribly long, but longer than this week.
You know what? There's 40 chapters in Exodus, and we're almost halfway there.
Actually, yeah, we're halfway through Exodus basically.
I mean, I'm sure by New Year's Eve, we'll only have 6 months to go.
I'm sure, exactly. One chapter or one book a year.
Yeah.
Actually, they'll get shorter here. But then they get longer again.
In a lot of it.
Kings and Chronicles, the slog.
Yeah.
But thanks for hanging with us, and we'll see you next week, next Monday.
Yep.
All right, and then we'll talk about Jethro and the judges, and probably more complaining from the people.
And I'll figure out the answer to the omnipotent, all-knowing, all-powerful,
yes,
whatever thing.
Yes, see what you can find. Do some chat GTPing on the Omni Paradox.
That's called research.
Research, of course. Research. Okay.
The Omni Paradox. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, you can Google that one. It'll come up.
Sweet.